So you've got past that hurdle of actually starting to make money online, and now you're figuring out where you want to be. A lot of people, they love to travel and they love to work whilst they travel. It's the perfect lifestyle. I've been living a kind of semi-digital nomad lifestyle since 2020 or 2019, and I've been working away from home for months at a time, sometimes for very long periods of time. And I've lived in multiple different countries across Europe for like 3 or 4 months. Some of them have been really great value for money, but some of them have really burnt a hole in my pocket and wasted a whole lot of savings I had, and I don't want you to make the same mistakes that I did. So because of that, I'm going to be talking about some of the most affordable cities that you can live in or spend time in as a digital nomad whilst you're traveling without breaking the bank. Because obviously when we get started in the first few years, not everyone's going to be making 5 or 10k a month. Some people are just making $1,000 or $2,000, and they want to know where they can reside in and live a life for themselves and be stable without wasting too much money. So the first one on the list is Chiang Mai, Thailand. So Thailand is a very popular place. In fact, I actually have a friend right now who's been traveling Asia for like 4 or 5 months, and he's been to so many different places: Thailand, Japan, Korea, and it's a really lucrative place where a lot of young people go for the first holiday, which is quite surprising. You'd think that everyone would kind of just go to Europe first if they live there, but a lot of people do go to Thailand, and that is because it has affordable cost of living, it has very fast internet speeds, and it just has a really welcoming community because Asian people are very friendly. There's also a really rich cultural experience for young people in Asia, particularly Chiang Mai. It's a really nice place, and there's delicious street food, and you have access to a lot of beautiful nature in this area. There's a lot of greenery, there's a lot of jungle and forests, and it's a great place to be. So what are the living costs of Chiang Mai? Well, you're looking probably about $500 to $800 per month for a 1-room apartment in the actual center of the city. Now, it's about $300 to $500 outside the center if you don't want to be where the hustle and bustle is, and the food costs are like $200 to $300 a month. So we're talking like on the less expensive side, probably like $500, $600 a month. You can actually live unhealthily in a small apartment, so it's really cheap. Then we also have, as we go towards the South American side of the world, Medellin, or Medellin as some people call it. And this is not as dangerous as it once was during the 80s and 90s if you're in the right places, so don't get it twisted. But you don't really want to be naive because there's a lot of people who can pickpocket you if you're not careful, so do be careful and keep a lookout. But if you have friends around you, this can be a good place to live and can be quite cheap because there's pleasant living, there's vibrant culture around this area, Spanish people are really welcoming and they have good conversation, there's a low cost of living, there's a growing digital nomad community in Colombia, and there's affordable co-working spaces for you to actually do your work at on your laptops and socialize with other people. Now, it has quite a well-developed infrastructure which not many people will actually know about, and it's definitely a place on the come up. Medellin is quite a big city as well, so there's a lot of things to do. Now, for living costs, we're probably talking about $600 to $900 per month, so it's a little bit higher than Chiang Mai. This is yet again for a 1-room apartment in the center, and it's about $400 to $600 outside the center as well. Now, food costs, it's like $250 to $400. If you go into those local restaurants and markets, then you can keep that cost level quite low. Now, one that I really like, and this was quite lucrative for me at first, was actually Lisbon in Portugal within Europe. Now, this is a really nice place, and it's actually really cheap. Not many people know how cheap this is, and it's actually a real valid option for a lot of people. This has a great mix of affordability, beautiful scenery, a growing digital nomad community, and it's the top space in Europe right now. In fact, they're kind of talking about like overpopulation from tourism because it's so cheap and so affordable. There's a lot of tourists moving here. Portugal, in the right months, has very pleasant weather. There's friendly locals who have good conversation. There's those good cafes and co-working spots, and it has a very reasonable cost of living in comparison to most of the West and Europe, because as you know, Europe is very expensive, and also it's very expensive post-Brexit as well. So this is a really good spot to be. Now, this one is actually quite close to where I am from in the UK, so this is quite a good spot as well. So it might also appeal to a lot of you guys who are British nomads as well. So we're talking about $800 to $1,200 per month in the center for an apartment, and about $600 to $900 outside of the center. There's cheap public transport too, which is a big plus, because if you want to move around the city without having the cost of a car, if you're really on a budget, this is also good. And it's about $300 to $500 a month for food, yet again, if we're sticking to those local restaurants and cafes. Now, just to note, even though these are a little bit higher in terms of the costs in relation to what you actually need, you only need to make like 700 euros a month, I believe, to get the visa here. So you don't really need to make that much money. If you really restrict yourself, you might even be able to get away with like 700 to 1,000 in total in terms of euros. Then we have Hungary, particularly in Budapest. So Budapest has stunning architecture. It's a really nice place to visit in Europe. There's vibrant culture, a low cost of living, affordable accommodation, which is what we're mainly looking at, and very cheap public transport. You're looking at like $500 to $800 in the center here, $400 to $600 a little bit further out, and about $250 to $400 for the food here. And of course, with European countries in Eastern Europe, and as we progress, we can also move on to Serbia. So I actually have a friend from Serbia as well, and particularly in terms of the city, we're talking about Belgrade or Belgrade. I believe this is the capital, correct me if I'm wrong. This has a lively city atmosphere. This is really popular actually for a lot of nomads to visit because you don't really need much money to be here. It has a very rich history and it's a very low cost of living, and to say how low cost of living it is, has a very vibrant nightlife too. Now this place is actually neighboring Croatia, which is a great country, and Serbia is no different. I've spent a lot of time in Croatia, and since that's next to Serbia, you can expect it to be very similar, right? It's like $400 to $700 if you want to be in the center in an apartment. It's about $300 to $500 further out if you don't want to be in the center, and food costs typically averages like $200 to like $350 per month. So as you can tell, it's very cheap. Now the next few ones are going to basically be in Europe because I want to keep this mostly in Europe, but I've also included some South American picks. But the next one's going to be in Poland. So now we're talking about Krakow. A lot of people who are in the gaming space may know that there's some big esports events that have been held in Poland, particularly Krakow, and this place has a really low cost of living. There's a lot of people who are nomads building up a big community in Poland, and Polish people are very welcoming, and most of the products in Poland are extremely cheap. If you look at some of the staples that people buy typically, they're very cheap in terms of consumer goods in Poland. So this is a very affordable place, has affordable housing, great food, rich cultural scenes, and a lot of heritage. So we're talking like $500 to $800 in the center here in terms of cost of living, $400 to $600-ish outside the center, and you can expect to pay like $250 to $400 for food. So the food costs are kind of the same in most countries, but I'm still giving you the figure because they're a little bit different on average. We're taking average numbers here, so obviously if you go a little bit off the beaten path, you can make things a little bit cheaper or more expensive depending on your lifestyle. Now Bulgaria was really popular a few years ago for being very cheap and being on the come up, and it's still a popular pick, which is why I'm going to feature on this list. And we're talking about specifically Sofia, Bulgaria. So in Sofia, it's a really nice city. It has a very low cost of living. There's reasonably priced accommodation still, even though it became quite popular over the years, and it has some good food options, beautiful parks, particularly the parks in Bulgaria are very nice, and there's some good co-working spots too if you're a little bit more sociable. So living costs $400 to $700 roughly in the center, $300 to $500 if you don't want to be central living, and about $200 to $350 on food you can expect to pay. And yet again, a very popular place, Latvia, particularly Riga, Latvia. So Riga, Latvia has quite a nice culture too. It has very affordable living costs, and it's a growing community over there who are doing remote work. There's a low cost public transportation here, so there's a lot of different public transport options that you're not going to have to pay a lot for, which is quite nice. I notice a lot of European countries really focus on public transport. If you go to Austria, they have one of the best train systems in Europe, so there's a lot of different places in Europe you can expect to have good cheap buses and trains. There's also a very affordable dining scene in Latvia, so that means there's great food options that are actually not expensive. That's what I noticed during my research. Living costs in the center, $500 to $800, $400 to $600 outside the center, and it's like $250 to $400 monthly you can expect to spend on food shopping. Number 9, we have Bucharest or Bucharest, Romania. So Romania is a very affordable European Christian country, and it is also a very progressive country too. Now this country has a vibrant digital nomad scene. The digital nomad visa though for Romania is a little bit higher in terms of what they ask, but if we're going strictly on living costs, they're actually relatively quite low. So there is a low cost of living. Now particularly Romania, which is going to surprise a lot of people, they actually have the fastest internet speeds on average, not for every household, but on average the fastest internet speeds in Europe. They have lively nightlife. There's a lot of partying and stuff like that going on in there, and there's also rich history if you enjoy actually exploring and traveling like I do. And if you're a nomad, that's probably what you're going to be doing in your downtime, particularly like Dracula's castle, or so-called Dracula's castle, where there's the history behind like Vlad the Impaler and the Transylvanian castle. There's a lot of cool spots to visit in terms of tourism, and you're probably going to be spending like $500 to $800 here in the center, $400 to $600 as you move away from the center, and about $250 to $400 per month on food. Romania is a really good pick here. Great social spot, great cost of living, some great historical spots to visit too. And the last one on the list, which I want to talk about, is in Slovakia. We're talking about Bratislava. So Bratislava, it kind of has that blend of historical charm with beautiful architecture, but also low living costs, which is what we're kind of looking at. So this place is located along the Danube River, or the River Danube. And from Bratislava and Slovakia in general, you have very easy access to other European places because it's on the Danube as well. So it has actually a really good position in terms of where it is in Europe. So it has real good access. It has a mix of Slovak cuisine here in terms of what you're eating, and a lot of international food options here. There's a lot of different international cultures in Slovakia and very affordable prices. So in the city center, we're talking like $600 to $800 a month. All of these costs are usually typically for a one-bedroom apartment. We're talking $450 to $600 for the outside real estate, so outside of the city center, cost for an apartment there, and about $200 to $350 per month on food. So let me know in the comment section below if there's any other places which should have been on this list that have a very low cost of living, because a lot of people who are just starting to make the first few hundred or few $1,000s online, they want to know what are good spots they can spend a long time in for a few months without obviously spending too much money. I spent a lot of time in Europe. In fact, when I first spent a long time in Austria before I was trying to get a visa, I probably wasted like 10,000 euros just literally being in quite expensive hotels. So it's very easy to waste money when you're in Europe. Whereas if you pick some of these places, which is typically lower cost of living, then you won't exceed your monthly income. And obviously back then I was making less money, so I was spending more than obviously I was making, and I just used most of my savings. Now I can afford to go to some places which are a little bit more expensive, but these places are still the best options because they're so cheap to live. You have money to spend, you have money to save, and you can just reside in them for weeks or months on end. So these are some really good picks. If you have any other countries you've spent a lot of time in as a nomad or that I missed off this list, please let me know. And also, if you're a local in any of these countries, if any of these figures were a little bit off and you don't agree with them, also let me know about that too. Maybe there's been some recent changes. And if this was just generally valuable and useful, smash the like button, subscribe for more travel and money videos, and I'll see you real soon.